is not necessarily on the newer modifieds and the newer late models per se, but yes, some of the stock cars are still produced this way. I've seen new ones still produced this way. The mounting point for the shoulder harness should not be on the rear clip. It should be off of the roll cage, right? Think about this. If this is back here where it used to be, there's a pipe coming back in this direction, right? Everybody follow me? There's a pipe here, and we put a hole here, we put a tab here. Another car comes in this direction and it hits the rear end of this car and it tries to shear the rear end off of that car. What are those belts going to do to the person that's sitting in this seat? It is going to rip them apart. All right? So anybody who's in manufacturing, I hope we're completely almost away from that, but I'll be honest with you, I've seen some high dollar street stocks in the last 2 years. A couple of modified brands are still doing that. We've got to get that back on the roll cage and get it off the clip. All right. Anything else from anybody? Feel free to come by if you have any questions for me. We're right inside the door. If you want to test the seat out, even if you don't fit in it exactly, you'll get an idea of what the belts feel like. If you've never done the ratchet belts, I suggest you come by and try them out, just to understand what it is. All right? Appreciate everybody's time. Brian, I don't know who's next or if anybody's left. So.
Thank you. Yeah, we got a few more there. Chad, you ready to come up? You nervous? I gave you 2 or 3 hours to be nervous.
Look back.
Tag it in.
Just a second, Chad. Let me get this. All right. Don't be nervous. I promise. Ain't nobody's ready to bite you.
I'm very nervous. My name's Chad Reed. I was planning on trying to get some key points, but I'm probably going to read this word for word. I was involved in an accident on October 5th last year that burned 17% of my body, mainly on my legs. I just want to share some information about the accident and show a few things that we're going to do to prevent it from happening again. I got together with another car on a restart, biked up on 2 wheels, slammed back down, and kept going. The next lap, the caution came out, and going down the back straightaway, my gauges started acting funny. Everything kind of started acting weird in the car, and then out of nowhere, fire went everywhere. From the time the fire started till the time it was actually put out was about a total of 15 seconds. I had flames going everywhere. I could not see anything, and I could not get the window net. I could not find the lever of the window net at all, so I couldn't get it down. In a panic, luckily I run a mesh style of window net, and I actually started climbing through the window net because I couldn't find it to get it down. And it was on fire, so I was actually able to get through it with the help of some traffic officials. So if you have to run a window net, prefer to run that one if you have to. And safety officials can cut that a whole lot easier if they have to. If they can't get it down, they can cut that style a whole lot easier to do. On what actually started the fire was we had a top wire come loose when I got in the wreck, and it bounced over. We have a still rated fuel line that goes to the gauge. The electric line hit the still rated fuel line, actually started spraying fuel, then bounced again, and obviously created a fire. I was in a panic and didn't realize what was happening, so I didn't shut the car off to help the fire from spraying. The guy that built my car, Curtis, has came up with a few different things we are going to start doing in my car and his. We went to a different gauge panel that doesn't have dummy lights. The dummy lights are built into it, so we don't have that extra wire. Plus, he found a fuel isolator from Quick Car so that Fuel line comes from the carburetor to this isolator that goes under the hood, and then from there, from the isolator, it goes into the gauge, but it is filled with antifreeze at that point, so that there's no fuel in the pump.
So just to talk about the gauges there real quick, this is one main reason why stepper motor gauges are a good thing. They're completely, they don't have any fuel or any kind of pressurized fluid that gets into the driver's compartment whatsoever. Those isolators work good, but you still have that, like that line running over, so you may still have had the same situation. But in the stepper motor gauge, where we can get those sensors in different locations completely, we get all that high pressure fuel out. So that's one big advantage to that style gauge versus what's a traditional, inexpensive mechanical gauge. There are some sanctioned bodies that require you to run a mechanical gauge and not a stepper motor style or a digital style gauge. And if that is the case where they do require you to do that, make sure you're getting that kind of an isolator where you're not letting that fuel get into the compartment anywhere.
I did not have a fire suppression system, but I will definitely have that in there before I'm checking the car. So you can see on the burns. I know it's graphic, but hopefully it scares somebody into being more serious about their safety. I ended up with second and third degree burns on my right hand, left elbow, and both legs. Both legs got third degree burns in multiple spots, which led to having skin grafts on my arms and legs, then had to have a second skin graft on both my legs. It didn't take where the third degree burns were out. I spent a total of 21 days in the hospital, and then another 3 weeks at the house of having to have my dressings changed every day, and then had to have my wife did all of that because I couldn't do it, and she had to help me pretty much do everything in the house because I was not very mobile at all for about 2 months. Been a little over 3 months since I had my accident. That's the style we've done that. I don't know, you can't see it on the bottom right, but it's the next one. It's been a little over 3 months, and I still, about 50% of the time, struggle to walk. It's very, it's painful stuff all the time. I don't know if we have anything on my helmet, but the weekend that my accident happened, I just always ran the standard bell helmet, nothing on it or anything, but my pit guy, Jake, that's a real good friend of mine, actually had bought me this skirt that goes on the bottom of my helmet, and we put it on there that weekend, and it prevented me from, the doctor saying, breathing anything in, didn't burn my neck at all, and I had, on my seatbelts are almost gone, it was so hot. Helmet, I always ran a 2-layer suit. I had a 2-layer suit on that night. It didn't even burn, really. There's a few holes in it, and I have it back here if anybody wants to look at it. There's a few holes right in my knees where the fuel was mainly at. But I don't have any burns from actual flames getting on me. It's just like Brad was saying, just the heat itself going through my fire suit. It didn't have a single flame touch me anywhere. It was just heat touching my gloves. Don't have holes in them. It just burned everything off the gloves, burned everything through the suit. Nothing touched me, just heat. So definitely take the wearing the fire retardant underwear, double layer suit, everything, and taking care of it like they're saying, because it can definitely save you from ending up like I did. And I think that's all I had. So if anybody has any questions about my wreck, I'm more than happy to answer them, but if not.
I think that's an example of there on the left of what Brad was talking about, how it yellows. They just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Just to kind of show people what he was talking about, how it yellows when it gets the flame. You can see the gloves were black, it looks like originally, but once the heats went through them, they've turned that yellow color.
Yeah, I just got to really say, Chad drove 15 hours to be here because he wanted to tell the story. I talked to Matt a little bit last night because I didn't know. I mean, I'm not a chassis builder, that a lot of people use the steel braided lines going to the gauge, and
That's a pretty well of industry standard.
right. But you know, I mean, if it happened to him, it could happen to somebody else in the room or the next guy, so.
There's certainly other options, you know, the catwalk braided stuff, you won't have that kind of problem with, but, you know, in the end, if we can, stepper motor help a lot, getting that away from it. There's lots of ways to, you know, it's a free deal, but at the same token, there are certainly ways to help it.
Right. Morgan, I think we'll get you up. I know you've been here for a while. You're probably tired of listening to all these deals. You'll take some.
I'll see if we can get it to you.
Okay, so I'm Morgan Sweer. I'm an ER doctor. I live in Jacksonville, Florida. I obviously there's not a lot of girls in racing, so I get it. You know, whenever it's like a random blonde girl just gets up here and wants to talk about racing, it's like, you know, what do you know about this? But my background, I'll talk about here in a little bit. But just briefly, I'm an ER doc in Jacksonville, Florida. I work at Volusia. Worked there for about a year and a half, I guess. And I grew up around racing. Next year I'll be a motorsports medicine fellow at Indianapolis Motor Speedway over there with Patrick. I got a little disclosure about this presentation. I emailed Brian whenever I saw about the safety summit, and I was like, you know, I'd love to get involved, and I'm really passionate about this. What can I do? And he was like, I'd love for you to give a presentation about head injuries. So my disclosure is this: I am a resident physician. That means that I have an MD, but I'm still finishing my training. I got 5 months left, and then I'll be a full-fledged ED doc. I'm not a sports neurologist, so I'm not the end-all be-all expert for head injuries, certainly, but I've seen probably at this point in my career thousands of head injuries from mild to severe, so I have seen a lot of this. I see this stuff all the time. So I did grow up at a racetrack. I am a pit crew princess, I suppose, but I grew up watching my dad race store cars and now modifieds. After medical school, I did a month of training at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, following them in a safety truck and in the pits, learning about driver extrication and fire safety and all these kinds of things, and now working down there at Volusia. So just to kind of set the scene a little bit and bring it back, I think he did a great job up here talking about his injuries as well. The first memory that I have watching my dad at the racetrack is when I was 4 years old, watching him catch on fire. This is an early and very old and very crappy picture of that wreck. But I just remember standing in the stands holding my grandpa's hand and being like, you know, completely helpless. That's not a great feeling for any loved one could have. That's why I became an ED doc, because I don't like to feel helpless. I want to know what I can do. I just remember waiting for him to get out of the car, and luckily he did not have terrible burns, but I think everybody that's been involved in racing has certainly seen an abundance of wrecks, if not terrible ones. At the track that I work at, Volusia, we've got this sign that stands up there. It says, somewhere at this track, there's a little kid who wants to be just like you someday. You owe it to them to be the best that you can be. And I think they put that up there because they don't want people out there on the track fighting. They don't want anybody flipping the bird to the flag stand guy. But I think I look at it a little bit differently. I think we owe it to everyone to be the best that we can be from a safety standpoint as well. We had a guy this season who won, and he's crossing and going into turn one, and he sticks his hand out the window, and it's a bare hand. And I'm going, man, no, that ain't it. You didn't have time to take that glove off. You weren't wearing it. And I think, it's one thing to see that, or to hear, oh, it's just hot laps. We don't have to be completely 100% have everything right. Or, we can loosen things up, or, do this or that. I think we owe it to everybody to make a better impression on the next generation of racers, and to do a little better from the safety standpoint. So, main thing I'm talking about today is concussions. What is a concussion? There's 1,000 definitions for what a concussion is. They range from very simple to very complex. But head injury essentially exists on a spectrum. You'll see very severe head injuries where you get like diffuse injury, seizures, death, and then very mild traumatic brain injury. That's what a concussion is, a very mild TBI, essentially. And so while that looks like essentially something that sometimes it's like, oh, well, that's not that bad, and get back out there, that can still have permanent damage to the brain, and it adds up over time. We've seen that a lot from the football standpoint of all the research that they're doing. So essentially, concussions are a clinical diagnosis. I can't run you through a scanner, do all these things, and say, oh, well, you don't have a head bleed or a skull fracture, you have a concussion. I have to look at the patient, at the driver, and say, oh, well, these are the symptoms he's having, this is what I'm seeing, and that's how I know that he has a concussion. So what kind of stuff are we going to be seeing? This presentation is geared really towards safety from a dirt track standpoint. I think I got amazing training, at Indianapolis, but that's the mecca of safety. They got all the money, they got all the gadgets, and we don't have that. We're standing out there on the track, and they're saying, well, we have this much time till we get these other 2 cars towed. We need to figure out if this guy can go or not. And we got to get back on TV, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of the standpoint that I'm looking at it from. So I want people to be able to recognize these things. I also want drivers that are looking at this saying, I want them to know what they should be looking for in themselves, and I'll talk about kind of why a little bit later. But basically, not everyone that has a concussion passes out. I think that's a big misconception. You think, oh, you hit your head really hard, you passed out. That's the main way I know you had a concussion. Some people will have that, some people will not. A lot of people will have other symptoms. They'll have blurry vision, they won't be able to walk right, they'll be kind of forgetful, they won't be able to concentrate. They may just have a persistent headache. That's the most forgotten symptom that I see for concussions. It's a persistent headache. I'm talking about like hours later, not like you got out of the car, you're still sweaty, and you went to your truck to get water and you still have a headache. I'm talking about you're at home, you're next morning, and you still have a headache. That's a concussion, 100%. So when we talk about head injuries in racing, there's a lot of very prominent head injuries, obviously, like these couple up here that everyone in the room probably knows. When we're talking about motorsports, we're talking about a very high-risk population. So a lot of the studies that are done in racing are done at the high levels with a lot of money. We're talking about F1, NASCAR, IndyCar. There's not very many studies for dirt track racing. So how do we know how many people are having head injuries in racing? How do we know how many people are having wrecks in dirt track racing? How many dirt track racing wrecks are there per year? No one can tell me, because there's no records, because there's no research, because there's no money, and here we are. And that's why I'm here, because I care about that stuff. So we estimate, basically, I listened to a study where they kind of estimated what they thought may be the amount of racing that we have in dirt track. And they estimated that it's about 70 times the number of wrecks that NASCAR has. So that's a lot of wrecks. And I think, it's easy to see, the levels of racing like that are highly televised on ESPN and say, oh, like, no one gets hurt in racing anymore. A ton of people get hurt in racing. It's just, we don't have any records of it. Whenever we have studies about racing, this quote comes from one that was done actually in the UK. They don't have a ton of dirt track there. They have a lot of like rally and lower like F2 and stuff like that. But they were looking at head injury attitudes basically about drivers, team members, things like that, saying that basically 45% of drivers had suffered a concussive episode. Only 50% of those people saw a doctor. Less than a third withdrew voluntarily from the event. 70% did not feel normal when they attempted to return to the race. So we don't know exactly how many people are having concussions and head injuries in racing, but I'd wager it's a lot more than we think it is. And not very many of these people are completely back to normal whenever they're going back out to race, which is a huge issue. So what data do we have on dirt track racing? There's being more studies done on it, and there's some research that's coming out that's very, very well done, that's studying essentially how the head moves in the car, looking at mouthpiece sensors and other sensors that go on the seat, essentially, like right here, because that's the closest thing you got pretty much to model the head, and looking at the different forces that we have. You can think about the brain essentially kind of like a snow globe. So whenever you're moving in the car, you can shake up a snow globe like this. You can shake it up and down. You can swirl it around. And all of those movements will make the snow go up and down in all kinds of ways. Every movement affects it differently. And when you have a crash, you're not just having probably just head on. There's head on, there's some kind of sideways, there may be some kind of flip, you're kind of up in the turn, there's other kinds of impacts that are going on with it. Essentially, other studies that have been done are looking at spinal injuries in racing, but overall, there's really not any like concrete, this is what we are seeing in dirt track racing from a head injury standpoint. The research is just not there. It's not there right now. And we're making progress, and the things that we're seeing are very, very interesting. One of the studies that I listened to be talked about at another conference this year was about a study that they did in the USAC Midget series, where they modeled some kinds of the wrecks that they had and used the sensors to tell what was going on, and they had quite a bit of force going on right there. It's kind of like the forces that we're seeing, essentially why people get head injuries in racing. We have a lot of different forces that you don't see in other sports. So if you ever see like a midget wreck, they kind of bounce. They do this like bounce thing that you don't really see in every series. Like I've never seen a late model particularly bounce like that. And you don't get that kind of vertical energy on top of the head in many other sports, where you have like kind of top down type of force. Essentially, whenever you have like a rapid acceleration, when you crash and you stop, your whole body goes forward like this, and then it kind of goes back. And that big force on the bottom of your skull, the basilar skull and your neck, when you're going back after stopping, that's a huge reason that you'll see a lot of basilar skull injuries and skull fractures And spinal cord injuries in the neck from racing is from that rapid stop. It's like, I can't remember who said that, some famous, it might have been Andretti that said the danger in racing is not in the going, it's all in the stopping. But that's pretty much the research that we have in racing so far. It's very little. So we talked a lot today about what determines why people get hurt in racing, the vehicle design, the track conditions, speed, the impact forces that I talked about, the safety equipment, and then there's individual factors. If your driver had a concussion yesterday and they get hit again today, that's going to be a lot worse than if they've never had one before. So if we can't use research from racing, what can we use? We can try and use research from other sports in the NFL. My hope, and what I think will probably end up happening in racing, is it's going to be kind of similar to the history of head injuries in the NFL. No one talked about it for a really long time. And then all of a sudden it just blew open and everybody was like, oh, we finally got to talk about this. There's so many issues. We got to do all this research and all this stuff. I think that's probably what's going to happen in racing. I don't want it to be that enough people have to get hurt for us to do a whole bunch of stuff about it. I want us to do a whole bunch of stuff about it so nobody has to get hurt. So what can we learn from the NFL? They use a lot of video review of the impacts. A lot of our races are videoed. We can use a lot of video review to look at races and say, okay, what kind of impact, what kind of injury might we suspect that they have? In the NFL, they use the most specific sign to learn if a patient has a head injury if they're slow to get up. I've seen that. I think you'll all see it. You see somebody, they're kind of, dazed in the car. You go up to them and you say, okay, can you undo your seatbelt? And they're just kind of sitting there looking at you. That's a sign that they might have a head injury. They can't do things. They can't take their seatbelt off, take their steering wheel off, and get out of the car by themselves. That's a big sign that they have a head injury. In the NFL, it's very interesting. 40% of concussion evaluations are self-triggered by the players. So we talk a lot in racing about people, they want to go back out to race, and I think that's true. I think, in the NFL, probably equally true. A lot of money on the line in both sports. And I think, looking at things, we got to give our drivers the information to be able to know when something's wrong so that they themselves can also report these things. Because if they're self-reporting these symptoms, then our drivers can self-report their symptoms as well. People say that they might want to hide their injuries because they want to get back out on the track. Nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants to be done from racing forever. And I think, people will report things to us. They say that the most common symptoms that led to that they had yes to the answers, had concussions, were headache, pressure in the head, and don't feel right. So earlier that study said that 70% didn't feel right when they went back out to race. How many of those people had concussions? So what's currently what we're doing in racing to evaluate for head injuries? So when I look at this, I'm talking about all of the options. This is a lot of these things I've seen being done in NASCAR and IndyCar. As far as these things, this is the current options, the best of what we've got right now. They're using oculography a lot. So whenever you have a head injury, a lot of the things that cause you not to be able to walk right or being dizzy or those kinds of things are issues with actually your eyes and rapid eye movements and things like that that we can't really see with the naked eye. And so they use these small movements, they use these goggles to essentially test for these things and to determine if they have a head injury. There's also a ton of tests that you can use. You can ask somebody 1,000 questions, make them walk 1,000 lines, do full neuro exams, and yeah, you'll figure out if they have a head injury. But we can't really do that out on a dirt track in 2 minutes. So how are we gonna figure out if you have a head injury and you can go back out to race and your car's not messed up? So there's no rapid, accurate tool to diagnose a concussion with validated research. It's a huge issue. So what are we gonna do? There's no definitive trackside test for concussion detection, and that's why it's dangerous. This is kind of what I do, basically. This is not validated by research. If I could go out there and do a full neuro exam on every single person, that would be really boring for everyone who's at the race to watch, but I'd be able to figure out if they have a head injury, probably. This is what I do essentially to go to the track and say, okay, I have no resources. I can't get oculography goggles. We don't have all that kind of money and time. This is what we have to do to try and see if this guy has a head injury. I call it the 7 T's to try to make it memorable for everybody. Number 1, take the helmet from them. Look at their helmet. I think it was said a little bit earlier, if you got a $10 head, use a $10 helmet. None of y'all have $10 heads. I don't think your moms would say that. Everybody needs a nice helmet, but what can we look at on the helmet to determine if they have a head injury? You can essentially percuss it. Like when you're looking for a stud, you'll kind of knock around and you'll see that it sounds different in one place. You'll see that on the helmet, and you'll be able to tell that it's essentially deformed in one way or another. I mean, if it's obviously deformed, then it's pretty obvious. But if it's not, then you can kind of knock around and tell. Tell me what happened. What am I doing when I'm asking them this? So I'm asking them, it's kind of a 2-step question. So I want them to be able to tell me, where we're at. We're maybe on this lap or maybe on this turn. This is kind of what happened. If they can't remember what happened, that's a red flag to me. If they can't tell me, like, we're at the racetrack right now, that's even a bigger red flag to me. That's it right there. Tell me where you're hurting. So it's easy to walk up to the car and say, you hurt? And they're like, nah, and it's, okay, let's move on. That doesn't tell us anything. So tell me where you are hurting, because then they have to process in their head, I am hurting. Now, second step, where am I hurting? And they have to be able to answer that question for me. 4, I ask them to do a 2-step command. So it's hard because it's loud all the time. So it's very tempting to go like this and be like, take off the steering wheel and put it right there. But I want them to be able to process what I'm asking them to do and do it. So I ask them to take off the steering wheel and put it to the right or something of that nature. And that tells me if they're understanding what I said and able to process that into an action and coordinated enough to do it. So these things are small steps, but they're actually getting me a lot of information about someone's neurological status. 5 is track walk. Essentially what I'd say for this is you get out of the car, you walk from here to the safety side by side or whatever you have here to there. You can't walk. You can't get yourself out of the car and walk. You cannot get back in the car at all. 6, tenderness to the neck. Why do I care about that? So we talked about earlier that rapid deceleration causes a lot of pressure on the basilar skull. A lot of times, if you have a head injury, you have an associated cervical spine injury. So I want to know if the middle of their neck hurts. Sometimes it'll be on the side. I want to know right here over your spine, does it hurt? Does it hurt at all? And that can help us because a lot of the times lower head injuries are confused with neck injuries and upper neck injuries are confused with lower head injuries because they go right connected together, overlay each other. 7, take their word. I think that's the hardest one to do because I feel like I was also always taught, everybody lies about their symptoms. They don't want to be in the hospital. Everybody wants to, play sports, whatever. But the literature for the NFL says they will tell you. And the literature in racing even says, people know when they don't feel normal. If they don't feel normal, they're just say something's off and they can't tell me what it is. That's enough for me to say, let's sit it out for a sec and figure out what's going on. So if their car is so messed up they can't get back in the race, that's one thing. It's like, all right, cool. I need to know if you have a head injury, but it's not as immediate of on the track evaluation. If their car's not destroyed and they can go back out, then I need to know if they are safe to go back out. Essentially, these are the things that I would say, no, you cannot go back out. LOC, what that means is loss of consciousness. If they pass out, they cannot go back out. If they're amnestic to the event, they don't remember what happened. Ataxic, that means they can't walk straight. If they can't walk normally without any assistance, they cannot get back in the car. Any of the 7 T's I talked about on the last page are abnormal. I consider not letting them go back out. And then also, it's kind of up to your discretion. You know, when you see a hit, you're like, ooh, that was bad. If you're concerned about the hit, just keep them out. That's me being on the safe side of things. Yeah, it's probably funny to keep some people out because you thought their wreck was bad, but out of one race, permanently injured and unable to race for the rest of your life or dead, I'll take my odds on that one. So what do I do once I think they have a head injury, essentially? Send them home with a caregiver. These people got to the race somehow. If they have a head injury, they can't drive themselves home. They can, if I don't think they can get in a race car, I don't want them out on the interstate either. That means that someone else needs to drive them in their race car home. It's our responsibility as safety personnel to make sure that they have a safe disposition home. They need to follow up with a physician. I think a lot of people that I've talked to at the racetrack, at least, that I say, hey, I think you should, go to the hospital. That's only been one or two, but they seem unlikely to go. But I think also one thing that I would love to see from a safety personnel standpoint is us following up the next day. That's what they do in IndyCar, is someone from the medical team will call the next day and say, hey man, it's Morgan from Volusia. You hurting today? What's going on? You feeling all right? And I think that simple thing, fosters a culture of safety in racing that we really need. And I think it's also one of those things that's like, if something is wrong, they may not have had the motivation to go all the way to the doctor, but from that phone call, it's like, okay, well, something is wrong. Let's do something about it. And you can get them there from that point. If they have a concussion, they need cognitive rest. They need to limit their screen time, music, loud noise, get adequate rest. And then one of the big ones that we see issue with is kind of that return to play type of issue or repeat head injuries. So if you get a head injury and then you have another head injury within 7 days, you can get something that's called second impact syndrome. And essentially what that is a worsened head injury. They kind of build on each other. And you can have significant impacts leading up to permanent brain damage and death from second impact syndrome. I'm not saying if you get 2 concussions, that's what's going on at all, but they do both build on each other. It's not something that we want to do. So if you're in, some kind of thing where it's like multiple race days in a row and someone has a head injury, I'd consider not letting them race the rest of the weekend. So in summary, what I wanted us to learn today are that concussions are really hard to diagnose. There's a lot of specific testing that you have to do and things like that. You can't see it on imaging. It's even harder to diagnose that on a racetrack. There's not enough research in dirt track racing. This field is wide open. There's a ton we could do. I would consider the 7Ts as part of your on-track assessment. This is kind of just what I do because I can't do a full neuro exam out there. Like I said, it's not research validated, but this is something that I would consider to get you enough information that you'd feel comfortable saying, I'd feel okay with them going back out on the track. And then make sure anyone with a suspected head injury is instructed on follow-up care. So I think what I got next, so y'all let me up here, so now I have a microphone and y'all have to listen. So this is what I really care about this stuff a lot. I really, this is basically my Christmas list for dirt truck racing, what I'd really love to see. Standardized safety equipment and response across tracks. Training for all track staff and drivers on safety. And this 3 is my number 1. So I say this is my Christmas list. This is really my career ambition list. So y'all can check back in 20 or 30 years and see where I'm at on things, if all this stuff is done. But I really want us to have an incident collection database for dirt track racing. How are we going to know what injuries people are having and how often if we don't even know how many wrecks there are? That's like next couple of years. This is like what I'm currently working on. I think we've got to face it from an incident classification standpoint, because I think from a liability standpoint, no one's going to report wrecks and injuries. They may report incidents like class 1 incident, stopped but kept going, or stopped and needed a push. No one wrecked, no one got hurt, but that's an incident. But then they may be more likely to report a level 5 rollover or something like that, multi-car incident. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it, but I think that's number one because we can't really do anything until we know what, are able to quantify the issue. Physician trained in motorsports medicine at every racing event, I know, that's a tall order. But I would love that. I think that's something that could benefit, everyone could benefit from. And we have docs at high school football events all the time nowadays, and so I don't think it's that wild in 2025. Incident analysis monitors on every dirt track race car. I think if we could see the video of the race and we could get the numbers on what's happening, we could predict injuries and do a lot of good with it. And then research on dirt track racing, series specific risks and injuries and incident data collection, and then everybody to go home safe. Yeah, that's pretty much what I want. If anybody has any answers to those things or any information, I will take your advice and ideas. This is pretty much the end of it. I've got my information up there, and that's pretty much it. I'll take any questions that anyone has too. I kind of rolled through things pretty fast, but I just wanted to kind of give an overview of everything.
Comments. Just several years ago, I watched a guy in a heat race get knocked out by a dirt clod. Didn't hit anybody, just got knocked out by a dirt clod and face down in the steering wheel for about 60 seconds, right? Clearly knocked out, unconscious. Broke the belts, got out, looked at the car. You can see him kind of doing one of these. Car wasn't broke, got back in, tried to finish the heat race, wrecked again, right? Like, we have to use common sense again, as I said. Like, we shouldn't allow that to happen. Like, if you're a racer in that race, like, you should be saying, stop the official and say, no, we're not going to do that. The other thing I just am a huge proponent of, and I'm certain you'll agree, but would take your feedback, is as racers, what we tend to do when we have, what do we tend to do when we have an accident? The car's destroyed, go back to the pit. What's the first thing I'm probably going to consider doing? Sorry?
Go to the other guy's kid.
No fighting. That's not what I'm looking for. No
Hey,
fighting.
we're being the best selves we can be.
Let me help you. You're super bummed out. You just cost yourself, let's say it's a late model, Matt wrecked, and
Grab a beer.
yeah, we go grab a beer. Then we go grab another one. What is it that's going to bother me about that? That's
Blood thinner. You got a concussion.
it's a diuretic. It's going to push fluids out of your body. We need to push fluids into your body. If we have any thought that there's a head injury, we should be saying, no drinking tonight, bro. Like, water. You're on water. And then we'll talk about it tomorrow. Like, this is a huge thing. Like, it seems so silly to even talk about it, but every time, if it's somebody I know, look, no drinking tonight, man. Just tell me you're not going to drink tonight. Because I know someone who did this, and they can't even be in their own shop now when a tool is going, a grinder or anything, because the sound of it, like, destroys their inner ear because they dehydrated themselves so bad after an incident that they can barely function with loud sounds anymore.
And I think from like the safety standpoint, if I want to reevaluate that person and now they're intoxicated, they can't walk straight anyways and everything. They're dizzy because they're drunk. So my evaluation is so limited. It's kind of crazy. But I love that story about the guy who, passed out and then got back in the car and wrecked again. Because, if you go to the ER and you say, I got in a car accident and I passed out for 60 seconds. Most ED doctors are probably going to scan your head. They're going to try and figure out if you have a brain bleed or something else going on because they're worried about a head injury. So I think, for us to be like, nah, he's fine, get back in the car. It's just, whatever. Or, it's just a stinger. There's definitely no spinal cord injury. It's hard to say that from such a limited evaluation. But I appreciate y'all letting me get up here and talk about this. I really do care about it, and I hope y'all learned something.
Morgan, I will say that I haven't brought this up yet, but I've had a bunch of donations get given to me from some people in this room and elsewhere. We was going to try to find a way to give it away. I don't know if something you can work with me. I mean, I had originally, me and cashier had talked, and he kind of got a fund together. I was hoping more dirt track promoters and stuff would be here, we may draw names and I give them, you know, $500 to go to buying new equipment or something, but, I do have, I've got the total wrote down, somewhere around $1,000. Look, everybody in this room, let's get together and figure out where I can, I mean, I don't want to die, you know, I've done this
Yeah.
on my own pocket, but let's, you know, maybe we find a young guy with seatbelts out of date, or maybe a track needs, you know, whatever it is, but I'll be glad to get it to the right source, you know, I don't want to just give it to somebody to put in their pocket, but, you know, if you know of somebody that could use something, then I want to, I'll definitely, you know, buy them, you know, whatever, you know, within limitations, but if the track needs, you know, new fire extinguishers, or like you said, that somebody goes through, they know a kid that's in a car that's belts are out of date, or their, you know, maybe their helmet's out of date, whatever, then I want to be able to take that money and give it to somebody that can use it, so.
Yeah. So I actually know a racer who recently started a foundation called the Save a Racer, or I think it's called the Save a Racer Fund, and she has given out a couple of like fire suits and things like that. I'm sure her foundation would be more than happy to take that and have someone
Yeah, we'll
that I
figure
could
it
get
out.
in contact with them.
Yeah, or if anybody in this room, you know, I've got, I mean, the money ain't going anywhere, it's not going in my pocket, so if you're at your track, or you're wherever you're at, and you see somebody, let me know, you know, and I will be glad to buy them something to make them safe, you know, because it's all y'all's money, and I put in mine as well, but,
I would say, take your money and promote this video.
well, I mean, like I said, I've never been one to, I've done this out of, you know, I don't want it, I personally don't need the money, you know what I mean? I want to give it to the good cause, so whatever we can come up with, we'll do that. But anyway, I do appreciate you coming in, I think it's huge, and, you're a lot prettier than these ugly boys I brought in. That was even better. Thank you, Morgan, I appreciate you very much. Got a couple of slides left here. I know it's a long day and everybody probably had to eat lunch. But if you can imagine trying to plan this event, not knowing who all was gonna be in the room, it was really hard. Let's see. Do I? Yeah.
Simulated here, but do that.
Kind of does the order to get started. We'll kind of go back or something like
So I had to turn your second camera over there so that we got most of Morgan's presentation, and then I'll have you play that video, well, videos that I sent to you. My name is Brandon Norman. I'm from Columbus, Indiana. I own Howler Motorsports and Fabrication. Primarily, we do sport compact cages, a lot of stock car repair, but in the past, sport compacts have been my biggest business and relations with customers. So when they started in our area around 2008, you could get a roll cage, put it into a car for about $300. What Brian just played, play that again. Pay attention to the top right of the video. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know. I couldn't count that high. That was a guy, one of our local racers. I raced with him in 2010. Brian's got a picture of his cage. I had another picture that I apparently didn't send, but they carried the car back with the wrecker and just the boom up, threw a ratchet strap around the top of the car, picked it up, carried it out, set it down. So normally I give a speech on racing and caging, and we've done a really well job, everyone in here covering most of that stuff. I will kind of point out the picture we discussed earlier, the A-pillar support bar. I am like anti putting the A-pillar support bar only halfway up the A-pillar, and the reason for that, again, you don't know which direction the crash is coming from. So you kind of got to go all different directions. If you run your A-pillar bars straight vertical, you take a side load, it's just going to bend both sides. So you kind of, again, need the triangulation to resist the twist. Go to the white card, Brian. Here we go.
Is that part blue?
That's not the same one. I'm the first one standing up here that'll show you a junk product. That was the 5th or 6th one that I built. The best part was I was standing in the grandstands and my little brother was driving that car. He got turned at the end of the straightaway going into turn 3, head into the wall, started flipping. As he's flipping, he gets hit in the roof. You can see the picture in the top left. I freaked out. You know those people that throw their hot dog and take off running down the racetrack? I think I carried my hot dog down on the racetrack. Walked over to him. They're trying to get him out of the car. I just walk up, grab him by his arms, shake him, and he just kind of, let me go, I'm fine. So what I took from this, there was bracing that I had put in these at the time. I've been doing this since 2012-ish is when I started caging cars. At the time, that had more bracing in it than everyone looked. Since then, I would like to point out that the majority of rules for stock cars, compacts, Crown Vics, anything of that nature, require a 4-point cage, 1.5 inch minimum outer diameter, and typically 0.95 wall thickness. That right there is proof that is not enough roll cage. So even though the rules didn't change, I took it upon myself as a cage builder. I left the outer diameter the same, but I started changing the thicknesses and the mounting points of where the things in the cage are. Back to the video of the black car. That was after revisions that I had done. You can go ahead and go to the picture, Brian. You're fine. That roll cage, that roll was 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, after I had changed things. And guys, I make videos on Facebook all the time, pointing stuff out. I've got another video we'll play here in a minute. I found this worked for me in the cars that I work on. This is what I stuck with. But just because the rules say a minimum, they don't really give you a maximum. They say 4-point, that car right there has a 10-point cage. So, first thing, if you don't know anything about fabrication, welding, find someone in your area that is trusted, has been doing it, and not just the guy that says, I'm a professional pipe welder, I can put your car together. He may be able to weld pipe all day. He's not a fabricator of roll cages. Probably the most common problem that I see, besides just bubblegum looking welds, I've got one of those here in a second. Everybody says you got to burn them welds in. You got to burn them in there. Most of these roll cages are less than 1/8 of an inch thick, 0.95, 1/8 of an inch, 0.120, 125. It doesn't take that much heat. Heat hit on heat affected zone was really good earlier. I seen his presentation. That's why I wanted to jump in on his. I had noticed that a large majority of the cars, if you look at the welds, they're really beautiful, really slick welds. Most of the time they're overheated, if you're MIG welding. TIG weld you can control better. It holds a lot more heat than MIG do.
Yeah, it's not that bad. You see a video. See what you worried about?
I don't know what's going on. So the only way I figured that out was I was welding stuff for guys when I started out, and I started noticing that stuff was breaking. Like I had to have a bumper I built, and the bars were broke off of it. You know, look at the bumper, look at the part, look at the tubes. Hey, my weld's still there. Why did my bumper break off? Yeah, here we go. Catch this. Yes, that is as pulled off of the racetrack, the last race of our local racetrack. This car was brought to me for brake pedals. What else we do? Brake pedals. I don't know. I had to move the steering equipment. Motor mounts. Motor mounts. Rear cross member mount. We got one carriage bolt in the back of the seat to the mount that was flopping around. The best part was that steering shaft. As we're pushing this car into my garage, notice every time you move the steering shaft, the seat was falling. I reach in and grab a hold of it, and yeah.
Oh, it gets better.
So I
They had to change that, they had to mention that, to use that for it.
no. Hang on, Brian. Hang on. Pause me. This car, this bugged me, dude. I made this video 2 months ago, 3 months ago. I mean, I knew that we were planning on coming here. I wanted this video for this class and for the people that may happen to watch this online. This guy right here is my best customer. Spends tens of thousands of dollars with me every year. He is also one of my best friends. Loves racing. Like, you're probably not going to find a guy that loves racing as much as this guy. He's very busy and very in a hurry, and our car will start, so we're going to the racetrack. He contacted me about doing the motor mounts, the brake pedals. As we're putting it in the garage, we noticed the seat. Was the seat mentioned? Nah. We didn't notice the seat until we started trying to steer the car into the garage. Go ahead, Ryan. Maybe. Uh-oh. And mind you, this is a stock car. This is a Monte Carlo G-body. This isn't even a compact. I mean, I know the compact guys get a lot of crap sometimes, rightfully deserved. Late model modified roll cages were not intended to be thrown into a Cavalier, nor do they fit properly. But I use this as a prime example because this is probably one of the worst situations of a car that I think I've seen. I mean, even the car that I knocked the door bars out with a hammer, it had a better main cage than this one.
Coming back to the video.
Yeah. Hey. Here we go. So it's in the back, it had one carriage bolt in it, and the back of the mount was not attached whatsoever besides the one carriage bolt. See how thin that is? That's like a 1/16 of an inch. There you go. Yeah, it was a plate. One plate across about, I don't know, 10, 12 inches to 2 pieces of 1/8 inch or so angle iron.
That containment seat, though.
Yeah, it does. What I was showing here, I've seen this, I don't know, maybe somebody can explain why. I've seen many cars that are just putting a single tab and attaching the top of the halo to it. I'm running through this faster than I'm talking. Look at that weld. You see that? That's the center halo bar to the rear hood. We got a big tab for the halo to connect to, and then we spliced into the rear down bar. That plate that they've got it welded to is probably 3/16 quarter-inch thick. It was welded really well too. So I'm explaining here, there was behind the driver's seat from the center of the firewall, that seat area there, a lot of guys, I don't know why, cage manufacturers, kit builders, will send the tubing out running from the bottom of the left side to the top of the right side. I don't understand why anybody does that. That's how this car was. We got holes in the halo, we got the plate, we stuck the rear down bars into the halo bars, welded those. You see those two, they're not the same size. There you go, right there. Right there is where rear down bars had been at one point in time that were cut off. And you notice the bulge on the top and on the bottom. So either this car had been flipped at one point in time or rear-ended and shoved the rear down bars through the back of the halo, that rear hood. Passenger side was done exactly the same way. Passenger side was quite a bit worse as far as the dimple in the rear bar. And as soon as you encounter something like that, as structurally weakens that tube, you take a flip on that corner, as soon as that gets pressure, it's just going to buckle. That whole rear top part of your cage is going to buckle in and come forward down onto the driver. You can tell if you're working on these kind of situations, working on tubing. If you clean it with a flat disc, something to that effect, you can look at it in the light and you can see the reflection change around the bent area. It doesn't necessarily show you a whole bent tube, but areas. A-pillar support bars, we talked about those earlier. We have no A-pillar support bar. That car gets flipped hard onto the right front, that right front corner is coming down. Look at this one. Center window bar. Notice anything wrong? From there to there is not welded. Not welded like that, just not welded at all. Front down bar, bottom connecting to the frame. They had put a plate on top of the frame, built the cage off of that plate, did not weld half of the tube, did not weld the plate completely to the frame, did not box it in. So here in a second, I think I stick my finger in the bottom of the tube. Yeah, there you go. It doesn't matter if it's compact, Crown Vic, stock car, wherever your cage is attaching needs to be boxed structurally, not just a 4x4 plate. You do a 4x4 plate on a floor pan as a 4-point, it's just going to shove through the floor. I did check the fuel cell had 2 2-inch straps, was properly mounted, the battery was properly mounted. If you look very faintly, there's just a bar running side to side as a back bumper. There's no vertical bar. There's vertical bars right beside the fuel cell, but nothing above the bumper. So assuming that car was ever into a crash, was rear-ended, the car that happened to rear-end it jumps the back bumper, it is running straight into the fuel cell. These are all things that guys think, well, this car, for example, has been raced for years. It's one of those 20-year-old cars, maybe not quite, but so because it had been raced for years, it's acceptable, right? It's a good car, fast car. This being my best customer and one of my best friends, I call him up and say, hey, what do you want to do with this car? Well, what do you mean? I said, top of the halo's got 2 holes above the driver's side, there's a hole in the passenger side, holes in the rear hood, it's bent. It must be bent in the right spot then, ain't it? No. Well, what's it need? Needs a new halo, new rear hood. We're not doing that. We gotta go to Talladega. We gotta get ready to go racing. So are you sure? Well, I mean, how much is it? How much work is it? I said, you gotta cut everything off of it. Top of the cage, behind the seats, everything that attaches to it, you gotta cut it all off, redo it all. We ain't doing that. We ain't doing that. Said, we ain't replacing it. I'm done with this car. You can come pick it up. He came and picked up the car. So maybe somebody will tag him in this. He did call me a couple weeks ago and said, hey, did you fix my car? No. I don't know if he drank too much Mountain Dew that day or what, but, well, I mean, I thought you said there was holes in it. I said, yeah, it's got holes in it. I can't just weld that and make it structurally safe again. So what we need to do is, I told you, I called you, I told you it needs a rear hood, it needs a new halo. You said we ain't doing that. Oh, no, we ain't going to the racetrack like that. That's going to be fixed. So I don't know yet if when I get back home, I'm going to be fixing this or, I know he didn't go to Talladega, so. But it takes pointing things out like this to racers to make them understand. Just because it's been this way for years does not make it safe or acceptable. The only other thing that I would like to hit on, Brian, can you find that late model picture I sent you? Messenger, yeah. My brother's ordeal, that scared me. I went on to make like 5 different design changes to my cages, yada, yada, yada. This right here was a guy that, if we can get it. I didn't know the guy. I was at a racetrack. Had built a Crown Vic for a friend. We went to practice. He was an older gentleman that had never driven a race car. What better way to start out than with a 4,000-pound car that drives like dog crap. He goes to the lineup shoot, and as he's going to the lineup shoot, there's a single late model out on the racetrack just practicing by himself. There. He comes off turn 4, jumps turn 4, smacks the wall with the right rear, spins around, flips over. You see that mound at the bottom of the concrete? His driver window is against that mound. I look around, this guy's flipped over on the racetrack. There's nobody around, nobody's coming to rescue. Give my dad, my daughter, says, hang on to her. Jump in my truck, pull on the racetrack. Get out of the truck, see a window. I'm like, man, okay, we can get this guy out of his race car. There's a passenger window. You ain't getting out of the passenger window of one of those. I holler at him, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Can you hurry up and get me over? I got fluids leaking in here. Well, I'm going to try, but I'm the only one out here at the time. It just so happened Tyler Erb was there, and Tanner English, I believe, were there just practicing. Those guys come rolling up on a 4-wheeler just laughing and giggling. This guy just flipped his car out here practicing. Is he okay? I said, he's still stuck in the car. Well, you can't get him out? Now his window was stuck right there at the bottom of the dirt mound, so his driver's window was completely covered. So I need a ratchet strap. Those guys took four-wheeler back to their haulers, grabbed ratchet straps, come back to the front stretch, hooked onto my truck, and we flipped him back over. If he'd have been on fire, you know what would have happened. There's many things that people look at. We got nice new seats and mounts and all this stuff and containment areas for your heads. All it takes is that one hole to get covered. You get flipped over, that hole's covered, how you get down? If it's on fire, how are they gonna put the fire out? These are not a bad idea. I have not yet put in a fire suppression system. Where are they located? Where do you point the nozzles?
Kate's she's gonna talk about it.
Normally at the driver, the fuel cell, and the motor compartment.
So if you're dealing with a 3 nozzle or plummet that way, you're covered. At the same point in time, if you're stuck in a car, you've got a fire, you set that fire suppression off, how long are you gonna be able to breathe if that's trying to smother all the air around the cockpit? Those don't. There you go. That helps, but that right there was probably the scariest I think I've ever been in my life, and I was not the one in danger. I thought for sure I was going to watch this guy that I did not know. I ain't even met him because he's still upside down in his car. I'm going to watch this guy die in front of me because I can't get to him. I think a big thing that people don't want to do, don't want to talk about, manufacturers, you've got to have room to get in and out of cars. Our sport compacts, being metal body, metal roof, a lot of the guys started making the side visors, dropping them down, making them Cavaliers look fast. We had a problem, one of them flipped at the racetrack one night. Roof crushed down, when it crushed down, took that visor piece, shoved it down, and all of a sudden, the safety crew's trying to get through a 10-inch opening to pull this guy out. At least the late model, you're just dealing with aluminum, and cut it pretty easily, but that sheet steel is a little harder to bend or cut out of the way, especially if you're not prepared for it. That guy's still up to white. If you watch this, you still owe me. Needless to say, we got him flipped over and out of that race car, and he was a lot happier then. I think we've covered quite a bit. Is there anything anybody's got questions about, want to talk about? No?
Rolling back over, if you had a concussion, that secondary hit would cause more trauma. So it's imperative that racetracks have boom trucks.
Oh, the trucks were there. Keys were in them. Nobody was driving.
Waiting on Kate, but she'll be here in a little bit. We got a couple other things.
That's one of those things, I mean, as racers, I'd race too, you didn't really think about it. It takes things like this, it takes you actually seeing situations like this before you go, man, that could actually happen. That was a open practice session. He was the only guy on the racetrack. Nobody else was around. How often does that happen? I seen it. Brian, I think I've covered everything I got.
I appreciate it. I know some of you.
What else you got, Brian?
We'll get to the cockpit safety and track safety. I know their car is. You had other things you want to say? Okay. Yeah, if you want to go ahead. We'll cover a few things here.
So you're talking about cockpit safety?
Yeah. It didn't work. Waiting on Kate. Okay. You might mention a little bit about weight, bolt and weight and stuff. It's on in the slideshow a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever seen one of those weights come loose at a racetrack before and see what it can do to a car, but it's not pretty. Yeah, I mean, you should at least have a minimum of 2 bolts in every piece of weight on the car. Don't take two clamps, a piece of all thread, and clamp on 100 pounds of weight on two brackets. It's kind of crazy the fact that we use aluminum weight brackets to load lead to make more weight, but in the end, that's what we do as an industry. So use it safely. Make sure it's painted white. Make sure it's tight. When a hoover's nut and bolt in the car that week, make sure they're not putting a half a turn on those things every time, because eventually they'll just strip them out. A torque wrench goes a long way sometimes when you're nut and bolt and stuff. But I mean, I've seen them take halos out of cars. I've seen them knock helmets off people. I've seen them go through blocks on engines. So that's kind of definitely something that needs to be mounted correctly and looked after for sure. You want that?
A little bit of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of in general.
So in the cockpit safety, the big things I see are the steering shaft not having the slip shaft in it or 2 heim joints, so it has a way to get out of the way. Just a straight shaft from the steering gear up to the steering wheel. You get a bit of hit in the front, that's going to go right through you. I've seen a guy who probably can't have kids anymore, and he had a handful of a mess from the steering wheel doing exactly that in an Enduro. Big holes in the back behind for the seatbelt mounts. It's a direct funnel when you're upside down for the fuel to run right down the deck lid and into the compartment where you are, whether it's on fire or not, it's still there. We've covered the seatbelt mounts. Decking is great, but it also is not helping with the egress in some areas. We talked about the window net mount. I think you had that your mount did not come loose. We also had a few years ago, a guy got in a wreck and it bent the A-pillar down. Well, it bent in such a fashion that his window net wouldn't come out, and he wasn't getting out of there without something different. Obviously, we're not going to run 2 mounts, a upper and a lower, but that's what it was into. And they were going to have to cut that, and most places aren't there with a knife to cut that. Enough room for your helmet, or your halo maybe being high enough. So many people are have their head above the cage. Like we talked with the emergency, knowing how to get the steering wheel off with the emergency people. Doug Wolfgang's wreck he had an actual pin. There was no quick release. It was a plastic pin that you pulled out and that melted and stayed and could not get the steering wheel off. And that was to save, an ounce? And that's the sprint car world. They'll save everything. I can't believe they run shoestrings. And making sure your tube for your helmet isn't getting caught up to where you're getting out and that's not easy for you to remove. Make sure you know how to do that. Sharp edges for if you're flopping around in a roll, that you're not hurting yourself on that without enough padding. They tell racers that we have to have padding. Well, that's one stick to most of us. That's what, I got it, it's right there. Just anywhere you can touch probably needs some padding on it. If you can reach it, it should have padding. Arm restraints, if you're not gonna run a window net, your arm restraint should be mandatory. They showed that picture earlier with the guy's glove out the back of the car. It probably wasn't on his hand. It was sitting on on the floorboard and blew out when he was crashing. It was mandatory for him to have gloves. They just didn't have them on. I can't imagine that people even think about racing without gloves, but they do all the time. Done the mounts. Screened in front for rocks and tires. I've seen mud plug get knocked out of the car, the wheel get totally full with a piece as big as the wheel. That piece come out, hit a guy in the head, hold it. Thank God he didn't have a full containment seat, because it actually folded the seat back and allowed his head to stretch back that far. And lead going off, which I don't know that if wire mesh is gonna stop lead, but at least it's gonna slow it down. I've seen a rotor come apart, went through the hood, went through the roof, and went through the trunk. And that was right beside the guy's head. That didn't miss the screen, but, so you just have to think about all those things. And he never even knew that rotor went through there. It was just 3 marks on the hood and on all those pieces where it cut through it. Where you put your shifter, where your hole goes through for your shifters, make sure those are sealed up. Anywhere water can go in, fuel and oil can go in. Knowing where your kill switch is, things to help you both ways. Make sure your kill switch isn't getting knocked off by a piece of dirt and you're getting run over by everybody because now the car's shut off. Making sure that the track officials know how you're shutting it off with either the master kill or the ignition switch thing. That needs to be marked really good. I guess some other things I got was, one of the things that everybody comes out and they go, I'm gonna go buy this $2,000 race car to go racing. But they forgot about the first $1,500 that they need for safety equipment. And that's the first thing that they step over and aren't gonna go back to it. They can't, that's the first thing that needs to be on their budget if you're thinking about getting a car, is that at least $1,500 in safety equipment. And that's just what they require us to have, not what you need. Anybody else got anything?
Kate's gonna talk about fire suppression. That's really how we met several years ago, so she's really good on
Okay.
that. She got some good things there that I think's important.
All right.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much, Brian, for inviting me. I actually want to tell a story about how all of this kind of happened. I think we all have a backstory and how we got involved in safety. And for me, my business is CrateInsider.com. I sell race car parts that are specifically for guys that run crate engines. And when I started my business, I've always meant to be a boutique type of a business. I'm not where you go to buy every single race car part known to man. I am very specific in the things that I sell, and I like to be, pretty much very niche. And I've expanded quite a bit over the course of time. But if it's something that you can just pick up at Napa, I'm probably not going to carry it. Maybe some spark plugs or some oil filters or something. And so when it came to fire suppression, I didn't really know much about it, but I knew that my dad had a fire bottle, my brother had a fire bottle, my boyfriend at the time, he had a fire bottle in his car. So I kind of thought that fire bottles or fire extinguisher, even growing up, my dad was a race car driver and had a fire extinguisher in his car before actual fire suppression existed. So I just kind of thought it was one of those things that everybody had. And it was several years ago now that there was a firefighter who was a race car driver in Pennsylvania who got into a wreck, got into a fire, and he died. And there was no fire suppression in his car. And so that made me do a little bit of research, and I started jumping online and I'm like looking up all these things about fire suppression. And then I find to myself reading a white paper from DuPont. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm way deep in this rabbit hole, and this is not something that most racers are probably going to do. I'm not finding this information very easily. So I called up Firebottle, I became a dealer, and then when I became a dealer, I'm also known for doing videos, so I shot a video. And so I become known for doing like Firebottle, talking about fire suppression. And then Brian's been doing classes forever and ever. He wanted to add some more safety information to his class. Dave Hammond knew me, so we connected and calls me up and says, hey, do you want to talk about fire suppression in my class? And I'm like, you do realize, I mean, I'm just a dealer. Like, I'm not a manufacturer. I'm not I'm not a super expert on this, but, sure. So I call Firebottle and say, hey, well, would you guys like to go to this class? They're like, nah, Kate, you go ahead and do it. So he's like, hey, we'll send you a dummy Firebottle. So that's what I have here is my dummy Firebottle. So it doesn't have any chemicals in it. We don't have to worry about it going off in the room or anything. But when it comes to fire suppression, what I've learned is that there are 3 areas of the car that we want to protect. We want to protect, obviously, the driver is the very most important aspect of the whole situation that we want to protect. But also, especially when we talk about like dirt late models or especially anything in dirt, nobody has a rear view mirror. So you could very easily be on fire in your fuel cell and not even know it. So we need to take a look at that area. And then the other area for fire is our engine compartments. So this particular system is called an AMRC 1002. And I do specialize in Firebottle. Again, I'm just a dealer. But this one is what's called both automatic and manual. So on these hoses here, there's 21 that's 24 inches, and I believe the other one's at 84 inches. And inside of here, and you guys can pass this around and check it out, but there's a little glass cylinder in here. And this is designed to automatically brake at 170 degrees. So if this hits 170 degrees, it's going to go ahead and set off the whole system. And wherever you have these nozzles is where the chemical is going to spew out. Now, it's not a foam, like when you think of a fire extinguisher and thinking of foam, it is a gas. And the way it works is it displaces the oxygen in that area, because one thing about fire is it needs oxygen to burn. And so this displaces the oxygen, and it actually takes 5 times more oxygen for a fire to move forward versus like a human to breathe. So but just by displacing the oxygen, we're not going to kill the driver by that. Gives us a little bit of time. So with this particular system, it has 2 automatic nozzles. You would normally put one at the engine compartment, or excuse me, one at the driver and one at the fuel cell, because especially with the fuel cell situation. And then it also has more nozzles that you can add, that you can pull a cable, and then that will set off the system. And so it is really important with, obviously, I'm sure, with anybody here who's been harmed by fire, yeah, you're gonna spend about $1,000, but it's a lot cheaper than, and a lot less painful than going to a hospital or being in a helicopter, emergency room. I'm sure anyone, I think Chad, there's absolutely no doubt, that you would want to do that. So any questions about fire suppression? I mean, talk about mounting it. Actually, Ben Baker is really good when it comes to that. I know Matt Henderson here, he's got some great tips about more of the mounting. I'm just giving you the kind of overview if anybody has any questions about fire suppression. I'm so thorough that all questions have been answered before they were asked.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. But anyway, yeah, you guys are welcome to, I can set this, this is gonna be up here, so feel free to check it out and take a look at those little glass cylinders. And I will be in the Crate Insider booth for the duration of the show, or I'll try to be. I'm also happen to be the organizer for the Cars Racing Show, so I kind of end up all over the place. But if I can help in any way, go ahead and let me know. All right, so I'm gonna hand things back over to Brian.
The last slide here, and then we'll follow up the question. I know we had 8, it's been a long day, but I do have, actually somebody sent this in and I had never really thought about it, but when I was asking for stuff, they said, pit safety, so, the obvious, you would think it'd be obvious, and it's not always, slow down in the pits. I mean, I think that's one, and, pit lights. I knew a guy who me and Cash both knows, Lon Stone, he kind of built the pit lights because a lot of tracks don't have lighting in the pits. Not only can, you can see your car, but you can also have lights where, drivers can see you. So that is something that pit lights were used for, not only to be working on your car, but to light up the area. And fire extinguishers, well, I'm not really versed on that, but that's something that I think we definitely need. Every car should have one. You should have one in your trailer at the back of your truck. A working fire extinguisher that's in date. I think, to me, you never know the guy beside you, something's kind of fire, what's going to happen. So, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the lifts. I know that's a big one, and lucky enough to have Dirt Car lift here with me. So he wants to do a little presentation, and we'll kind of wrap up this question.
Bronze, okay? Now, Brian saved the best for last.
So on pit safety, which I'm on a guy right today that had this happen, adjust in timing, you don't need 5 guys leaning over an engine adjust in timing with the engine at 4,500 RPMs. One guy can see the timing light, and one guy can see the mark. The rest of them are there for nothing. And I don't know the guy, so I didn't get permission to post a picture, but his face is pretty well mangled from a blade coming apart and hitting him in the face and the neck, it sounded like. And yeah, and so there's that. Being aware of what you're doing when most people don't understand the race car, besides the driver. Don't be standing between the back of the race car trailer and the car when somebody's leaning in to start it. Next thing, it's running and driving over the top of you. Exactly what they said about the fire extinguisher for you and your neighbor. At the shop, the same deal. You got guys that don't know what's going on, and they lean in, hit the ignition, and you're supposed to bump it and not start it, and they got the key on, or the ignition on, and now it's running, and you're driving around in the shop with nobody in it. That's about all I can think of. Aware of where the race cars are while you're racing, especially sprint cars, but just in general, the races coming out of 4, you don't need to be watching in 1 because the wing nut at the back is the one that's going to crash and run over the top of you when you're standing at the flag stand on the infield. And that's not the place to be watching the races from. If you have to pay attention to that. And then walking in the pits, be aware of where the cars are going, where they're going. All of a sudden, some guy comes in mad, he's turning left and going to his pit stall. And if you're walking past it, you'll be under his car before he gets stopped. That's pretty much all I can think of for hit stuff. Radiator caps, you make sure you're not pulling a radiator cap off. Usually if it's that hot, that cap coming off is not going to save the problem. You can cool a car down through the radiator, but you're pulling that cap is not going to do anything besides put somebody at Megan's ambulance. Jack stands, he's going to talk about the lifts, but if you don't have a lift, make sure you got jack stands and pressure on the jack stand. The jack stand under there, the odds of the car hitting the jack stand when it's falling is not very good. So that's what I would have with that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good overview for what we see at the pits and things like that. For those that do not know me, my name is Ricky. I'm a mechanical engineer. I work with Dirt Car Lift, Dean over there. And I got this little pit lift safety presentation. I didn't know about this till about 72 hours ago, so bear with me if there's anything wrong about that, but that's all right. So just a couple key points here. We're going to talk about what not to do, what to look for when you're purchasing a lift, and then just kind of input from our side of what we see. We go to a lot of tracks, we get a lot of input from a lot of these drivers and things like that. So one thing, what not to do, okay? The first thing that you do not want to do is exceed the weight capacity of what the lifts are rated for, no matter what brand or manufacturer you're going with. You know, don't go lift up your wife's SUV to do a tire rotation and then go take that same thing to the track. It's not gonna work out well for you. The other thing too is to try not to lift up anything on an uneven surface. That being said, you know, I know the dirt tracks aren't always the most level and, you know, this grander thing that you may see at Indy, but even then, you still want to try to at least stay a little bit level with your lift, or at least put yourself in a position to where you're not going to be in a realm where something bad could happen. Try not to leave the vehicle unattended. You made a great point. You know, a car may fall or something may happen. You don't want to just, you know, be out drinking a beer while your car's, you know, upside down and potentially catch on fire. You know, who knows? The other thing too, don't modify the lift. You know, if something's wrong, if it's not fitting correctly, we'll talk more about that. Don't try to do it yourself because there's probably a reason as to why that place is in there for a reason. It's there for a reason. Improper maintenance, you know, maintenance of putting in the wrong oils, not checking your seals for your hydraulics. If it is a hydraulic lift, there are some others out there in the market that are not. Check for wear and tear on those critical components as well. So your bolts, if your bolts are bent, please get some new bolts. For us, we say about every 2 years is a good time for you to go ahead and replace through a bolt replacement kit. That's just to, you know, even if your bolts look fine, even if everything's good, it's still a good. It's like any tool. You want to make sure that whatever tool you're using is, you know, up to par. The other thing too, don't use it with fluid leaks. If your lift's leaking, it's probably not lifting in the first place, but if it is, it's going to come down. Okay. And finally, just try to follow what the manufacturer says. There's a reason for what they put on there, and you know, try not to skip just those regular inspections because it is an important thing to look out for. And you know, just like I said, don't try to lift up anything too stupid. Don't lift up dump trucks. Don't lift up your 18-wheeler, and you know, just things like that. This is a finicky mess, isn't it? All right, could you hit the turn that monitor around just hit the button, the arrow? Yeah. Thank you very much. It's gonna be my point. That's that. So speaking of dump trucks, this is me lifting up a dump truck. This is what happened when I did that. This is obviously for a prototyping thing, but you can see that is not viable or serviceable in any form of regard. If you ever did see anything like that, trying to, you know, call your manufacturer and say, hey, something's wrong, I did this, you know, don't lie about it, you know, just say what you did so that we can get you back on the track. Next one, please. All right.
I got about 400 things going on.
I got you. Here's another one too. This guy actually was like, hey, is my lift wrong, or can I still use my lift? No, you cannot. We did end up fixing this lift, and at the track, it was serviceable, but you couldn't use it in the condition that it was in. And we get calls like this all the time. And I'm sure other manufacturers do as well. And this was, I think he was looking up some different chassis or something. He said that he didn't do anything out of the norm, but. And then next slide, please. And this is a video on just that together. So there's no audio anyway. All right, let's see. This is a rock, lifting it on the center point there. Lifting it upside down and backwards. We're lifting it upside down and backwards there. What else here? Oh, this is just backwards in general. So you can see here in a second the card, yep, the card's shifting. That's no good. Upside down again. Had that happen a couple times.
I've seen that more than I can ever do.
Yep, not good. That's what happened on the rear. Bumping it up and down, just causing unnecessary pressure to the hydraulics. Not the greatest thing ever. And that's what finally vented there. That's a non-serviceable lift. So we would have to fix that lift in some regard. Not the best so this is what you want to look for when purchasing that. Right. One more. All right, there we go. We're gonna do that right there. So you want to look for the low capacity, make sure that your lift can actually lift up what you're trying to do. I mean, there's a big difference, everybody here knows, between a late model and street stock. There's a big difference there. Ensure the lift can handle the specific car weight with a safety factor of at least 1.5. You just want to make sure the engineering behind it is up to par. Durability and build quality. Don't get a lift from, the two guys and a welder. It's typically not the best idea. Look for powder coated steel frames to resist corrosion in harsh environments. You want good materials to be used with that. And as Spencer was talking about, different materials for chassis design, that also applies to lift design as well. You want your portability and adaptability, and make sure that it's compatible with the different types of racing that you're going to be doing, whether that's side-by-side, late models, modified, sprints, whatever. There's a configuration out there from any of those manufacturers for you. It's not, one size lift does not fit all, so just make sure that you guys are lifting up the right places. This is a manufacturer's input. Here's one. Basically, just the physics behind it, how the materials work, how they align, what's going to go into prolonging the life of your lift. Lifts are expensive, and a lot of these guys that are out here racing, we're balling on a budget. We're weekend warriors, and so we don't want you to have anything wrong go bad, or anything wrong happen, and you spent X amount of money on your lift, and something bad happening. So, just other physics that we use to try to figure out exactly what is going on and the design part of everything. Next slide. What goes into the design? On our end, what we'll do is we'll CAD out the entire thing, depending on your chassis, depending on what type of lift or lift brand you're going to be going with. We do motion studies to ensure the lift is okay. We do a finite element analysis to, what happens when a car is on an angle and is going to be in a high stress environment like that. Well, you got to figure out what's the stress points there. What are the places that our customers going to be buying from that are, the things that they're going to have to reorder. Thermal analysis. So that's kind of the niche, but basically for your motors or anything that's an actuator or a linear actuator or anything like that, you just want to make sure that there's no changes in temperature or anything like that will affect your lift. The biggest change in temperature that we have that we see on our side is pressure. Most people leave their lifts inside their trailers, and what ends up happening on the hydraulic side is that there is going to be pressure buildup in here. When they have fittings aren't working and that sort of thing. So we tried to come up with a good solution for that. It's nothing too major or anything that's going to compromise the safety factor of the lift, but it is just something to not beat your fittings. It's nothing to do with that, and we see a lot of drivers do that, and it's not a good thing to have. So don't beat your lift. There's probably a really small fix to make it work again. Next slide, please. This goes into, I know Spencer had talked about SolidWorks simulations and things like that. We do a lot of that in-house as well for our stuff, just to make sure that everything is, when we come out with a new product, and when we try to make the racer's life a little bit easier for the pits, that everything's tip-top. The video that you saw earlier of that lift there, the second one that we made of that, once we verified that everything was good, actually went to a little-known driver who may have heard of him, Chris Ferguson. And, well, he hasn't punched me in the nose yet, so I think that lift worked out pretty well for him. So, and I think that's pretty much it. Let me hit one more slide. Yeah, some questions. The biggest things that I would say are when you're looking at whether it's a hydraulic or any different type of lift, just make sure that there's different safety things to look into. The rigidness of the hydraulic lines, if they're double shielded or not. Don't use like an air hose line if you're going to be, fixing or trying to tinker with your lift. Make sure that the pressure is withstandable on the lines themselves. Also make sure that everything is rated for what dirt track racers are going to be doing. Dirt track racers are very harsh in all of their products. I think everybody can attest to that here. That's just racing in general. So with that, you want to make sure that any modifications or anything that you're you're doing are applicable to that. Don't lift up any other different type of chassis brands. There's some that are very different than the other. Like I said before, not one size lift fits all, and there's a big safety factor there. We've had guys just do stupid stuff, and I had this lift, I switched over to, from modified over late model. Now the whole thing moves up and down, and now the car has fallen off the lift. I can't get the car down from the lift, so I'm just going to cut the lines. Most of the time, it's just an electrical issue or anything like that. So nothing too ordinary. But lift safety for any brand or any manufacturer is definitely something to look into. Also, the electrical side behind that. Most anybody's going to have an electrical component to their product. Just make sure that that product is having some sort of electrical safety configuration there, like a battery disconnect switch or something like that. Other than that, that's pretty much all I've got. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Guess I'll stand up here now. Guys, I think we've covered everything that I put in place and more. Thanks again for coming. I know it was a lot of money and time and drive and all, but like I told Chad, I keep going back to him because his story is unique. Out of all this today, if we could just save one person, just one person from getting burned, getting killed, or getting hurt, then you know what, it was worth it, because you don't realize that a lot of stuff is pretty common to some of you guys sitting in this room. It's not common when you see videos like Brandon shared with a guy that's been racing forever, and his cage, had holes in it and all. So, hopefully we get this out. It'll be a couple of weeks. I gotta wait on Kate to get it, and then it'll be on my website for free. So it'll be free. And as time goes on, we can always add to it some of these slideshows and stuff. We can always upload that. So, we can keep continuing to add to it. So I think it's a lot of great info. I learned a lot of stuff, and I've sat through 100 classes, and I know Cash has been to about 10 of mine. And he told me earlier, he said, man, this was really good. I think a lot of people we had, I appreciate Ben and Matt. Matt kind of came down for just in case I needed him, and I probably really didn't. And he wasted, a part of a day, but he's just been a good friend. And Ben, every time I call him, he said, what crazy idea you got now? I'll be there. And he's there every single time I've ever asked him. So with all that said, I appreciate it. I do have that money. I want all y'all in the room to think about that. I'm telling you, if you've got somebody, you see somebody at the track, whatever the case is, contact me. And I don't want to just give it to somebody, but if somebody needs some new belts or something safety related, then I want to do it. Or you go to your local track and they don't have a fire extinguisher, I'll be glad to put that out there. So I haven't spent the money. I know a lot of you guys have donated to it, so I want to make sure we get to the right people. I don't know how to do it. I was hoping there'd be more track people here, which they should have been, and I was going to, give it to them to use. But however y'all think about it in the future, everybody knows how to get all of them, and it's pretty accessible. But thanks again. I know you're hungry, you're tired. You guys got to drive back in the snow, and I appreciate your time. And hopefully there's a year or two. I want to do that, and we'll just kind of build on that. But Spencer, a lot of these guys that spent time and money and slideshows, thanks again. And y'all stay in touch. Let me know how the year goes. If you learn something, whatever we can do going forward. Appreciate it. I'm gonna go get something to eat, and thanks again, guys. I seen that.
Second round, they see it. Yeah. But she'll break it up, drive back to the six. I don't know where you can go back. You can see it's
Last night.
All it is all the hair, well, part of it. Changed it. I lived in that also. Did you weld it?
I thought they might say my seat broke. My seat belt broke. Fix it. And I'm on display.
Well, probably more than stuff we're gonna keep trashing in, and probably more than anything. And oh, he did. And then back up home, we can make it. The world's greatest driver.
See what I heard of it. Just it.
We got a bunch of it. What did you need?
Got all my stuff fresh. Yeah, we got three. Trying to get rid of the symbiotes.
I wondered.
Well, I still have to maintenance ours, because even though we're selling them, if we don't, they have to be ready. And like, when I go to Volusia, not next week, but the week after, one of those started back for a backup. You're gonna need a backup. You're gonna need a backup. I destroyed one in Charlotte. It tweaked the halos in the bar that goes between. It exploded that bar. Like it killed the front clip, rear clip, and the center section.
Years ago, I heard of
They were definitely doing thin support for the bar that goes from the midway to the right front to get some flex there. We cut that clip off. I got it done well Tuesday. And I was leaving for home Wednesday to go to Charlotte. And I said, if y'all need help assembling it, call me, and I'm gonna go try to sleep a little bit. Before we called me and said, hey, I'm gonna help left. They went to bed. So I got back up at 11:30 and went and put that thing together. We got it on the trailer at 4:30. All that stuff,
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it. While they're down there, after whatever.
Where are you from? I don't.
I'm from Statesboro, Georgia.
Okay.
Joshua Bishop.
Okay. Was you just coming to the show or something?
I work for Spencer.
Oh, okay. I thought, I didn't know if you was on your own or you just came. Just,
So here in Mountain Markers.
partial, but I thought it was pretty good.
The hardest part, I feel like, is just it's hard to whole thing all the way through, like, actually, like, guys who we get the numbers of them, what money y'all gotta do to follow it, it's amazing.
It'll be good when they get it cataloged.
Yeah. That's what Kate will do later, because I know it's going to be a little here there, so she'll cut it in segments. Now that I've done one, I know more, but I had some people come in leave, and I had more really, if you do it,
I would say from 10, 15 to 11 minutes, 3 chances. 11, 25 to 12, 25, where there's seats, pockets, bales, to do it like that. And that doesn't come to money. Chip on chase people are here for that time. Get that on. We'll see people and the racers themselves.
So it was, and they were like,
last time I worried about people. Yeah.
I don't know if you have it, yeah. I guess that's what I'm saying. You probably more so than you, I think that's. I never, I've never thought about safety of the leg.
It was, I
Fire,
remember,
they rolled over, never that happened. In that, the air shot was back on that, well, like that. And I've seen fire at the racetrack, but it hasn't like personally affected me. I got 5 of them for sure. I don't know. I asked that girl because when I was in high school, I played football. I know I had a concussion or two. I swear it's still like he was talking about. Yeah.
yeah, that's me, like I said, I never read it. But yeah, I'm not very used to it. Like, when I was over here talking with that, that's me, you know, I remember, and to get out of the red. If I would have house, I would have been a lot of yeah. I wasn't prepared. If I would have had those, I should have put it on. I went recently this past weekend with the guy for the first time I ever met him. He said, "Hey, how do you help with this training?" I said, "I got good results." So I've never even met, never even talked, never even talked on Facebook. He said, "I should have done shook his hand." But the night before, which I didn't bring it up, I wasn't certain about that quick release before Jason Garber replaces everything was in somebody else's truck. Also, I destroyed it and you bought and tested too late. And that all was worse than what I did.
Yeah.
I've seen so many things that you just sit back. I just got a fire in the car, but nobody was in here or anything. So I was just car coming up to not the field, not the line, where the fire was. I hate fire happening on pretty good time. Gas. The gas is cycling up there as fast as it's cycling out of the fire trucks. I don't know, that's what I was checking our car. The guys, everybody that was has walked to the infield and started the infield running up. And it's my truck's cars were, and two cars are there trying to get that work. The whole time I was on the radio, but they stood there,
Right, yeah.
I'm telling them, bitch, you know why I'm anyway. Anyway, I finished that. I walked across through the field, never ran, I wasn't excited about my job. Walked across the field, walked up to the firefighter, tapped him on the shoulder, like this, tapped him on the shoulder, right like this, took him to the back, so we opened the trunk, we went to open the trunk.
Yeah.
Anyway, he opens it, and I go like this. I just stood up with the fuel pipe and took it out toward the west. Pointed at that one, and I went like this. He was shot in the fire. And I didn't bring it up because I didn't want to bring it. I wanted to say, girl, we should, the law should be allowed to run a rear mountain on the back of the engine. And we should give all the used woods to the stock cars.
Yes.
And even that was that mechanical phone pocket, well, we can't run. In the stock cars. And,
No, not in the stock.
not in the stock cars. So just give those to them, and that way they have a place to set up. There's so many. It's simple, we went and we gave rotor rear ends to the hobby stocks. What should we have done? We should have made changes to the street stocks and gave them full rear ends that the street stocks had to the hobby stocks. And we could have sold all the used ones, but we don't, can't do that. And it's a good deal for a racer, but it's a bad deal for the racer's pocket. I'm really excited that I am speaking and my instruction to do. I told them for years that I've built a long time ago and maybe more that there will be just about between the door ridges and the top table but it's wrong. But anyway, it's those two rules and you want your kid back all the way. I don't know. Yeah, probably won't be, what kind of deal? So they made it legal, which was better because.
What'd you say? No, now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
It was okay to have 40 inches silver. But if you put a ring for that back water, which for motion of where the bell is pushing, you know, where the wheat transfer is going to end up, well, then it moved it forward. It was a terrible.
Yes.
And yeah, I couldn't tell them. I build it 2 or 3 cars a year, and they're like, oh, no. And I'm like, well, guys, this is what I tell you, your shit is fucked up.
Yeah.
But that fuel pump deal would be the biggest one.
Yeah.
And a big safety deal. And so did you think, I'm not wanting to force blame on anybody, did you think the fire department did their job? And
Yeah, I feel like everybody there did, I mean, it was all, by the time I got stopped, they were to me and had the fire out by the time I got stopped, like 4 or 5 seconds. It just took me a little, because I was trying to get stopped, I was already trying to get undone, I was just doing everything so fast. I mean, from the time the fire started until the time I was out was 15 seconds. I mean, it happened really quick, but the track officials, everybody did. I was completely ecstatic about the way everything went. The only thing that I was like, track that doesn't have an ambulance there. And, you know, it was, what, 15 minutes before an ambulance got there. So they just, which they had medical staff on site, but she was a nurse at a hospital. You know, it was actually the track officials.
She was actually riding in a side by side.
Yeah. She was, okay. I mean, it was the promoter's daughter, and she's a nurse, so she kind of took care of me
When I
until.
talked about the sprint car stuff, I was at the sprint car track for a long time, and there was a point in there where we bought a ambulance, and that was our ambulance.
That's what they had an ambulance at the top of the hill, and that's.
And just the gauze, everything that's in there was wore out.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and that's how theirs was, which, I mean, they did a good enough job that I was able to be taken care of until the paramedics got there and could start doing.
Right.
Which, I mean, everything she did, the paramedics were already doing for me anyway. So she did a great job for the 15 minutes while I was waiting on them. So I was, yeah, as far as the whole process, it was a bad situation, but everything was done good, you know, besides actually being on
Yeah, you going home tonight? I mean, are you leaving here a little bit?
We're going straight to South Carolina from right here.
Well, I appreciate it much.
Well,
What'd you think? I thought overall.
Yeah, the whole thing was phenomenal. I just.
But I know it's not your, I know it's not your deal. You just had a story to tell that I hope.
Yeah, it's a good story.
I hope the story and pictures and stuff, even if it scares somebody enough to change one thing.
I was sorry. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I was honestly nervous, but it turned out better than I expected.
Yeah,
It's great. To pass out to the public.
I speaking of Sarah, when I went and read, you know, I should have wrote down notes and for me to get up there. But the one, like when I sat over there about the big thing, that's me.
Yeah, just a lot of, you know, Spencer, a lot of cage construction, and just the stuff that you see out there. Like a gas show car. That's out there, right?
Oh, yeah, it's
It's out there.
scary.
You don't have to see.
That's my car stays, the guy that builds my chassis, my car stays there. I shop at the same place as him, and some of the stuff that people bring to him to work on.
Is he still doing much?
Curtis.
Did he quit for?
Well, so.
Is he got a full-time job?
He's got a full-time job, and I mean, he builds 12, 15 cars a year now. I mean, that's.
I hadn't talked to him sucker in a while.
Yeah, he's probably.
Did you tell him he's coming up here?
Yeah.
I like it, or he should like me.
Oh, he does, absolutely. That's when I told him what I was doing. He's like, man, he's a good guy. I've done a bunch of stuff with him.
Yeah. Tell me why. Yeah, I've known him for years.
Yeah, that's, yeah,
Well,
he has a
you know,
full-time job and
Like I
just,
said, I mean, thinking all around, I shouldn't be the guy next to him. It should be somebody in racing. I'm the guy that don't race, don't do it.
Right.
right.
But
I
I
can also see, as, I don't remember his name, but Spencer, you know, he's like, oh, we need a committee to do it. Well, all that's gonna do is a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of blame. Because then what they're gonna have is exactly that when something happens, now you have that it's your rule, it's your committee, this happened, here comes my lawyers.
Well, that's, so Cody, the other guy that owns a track in Oklahoma, because I was supposed to be here, I was talking to him and he told me, he was like, there was a fire right after mine at his track. And a bunch of people were going after him saying, why wasn't this car inspected, blah, 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 blah. And he said his insurance company told him, do not inspect your cars and do not put a sticker on that car that says it was inspected at your track. Because as soon as something happens to that guy, well, I inspected that. You inspected my car and my seat broke in half when I didn't wreck. Well, you inspected it and said it was safe.
Yeah.
His insurance company said, do not ever inspect
I don't
your
wanna
car
give
with
you
a
any
sticker."
numbers because I'm not a soup person, but when I done Wolfgang's deal with that pin, KSE sold that pin. That's all they did was sold that plastic pin. They didn't build it, they didn't do anything. They sold it to Doug Wolfgang. And their insurance paid him $75,000 for that one little pin. But that was back in, I don't know what year that happened, 93, a long time ago. So it was quite a bit different, and it was quite a bit different than what we are today. But that's it. But they jumped on board to do that. At that time, he went to that, and they said, well, we've got to do this, and it was literally people were jumping on board to write their checks for.
That's a lot of people signed up to be here for track. Should be people here. I mean, I realize money, and, I'm on Thursday, a lot of stuff, but you would think like tracks and everything, that's what you got.
I probably wouldn't have been here. So I had a house in Iowa get destroyed by a flood, and I've been fucking with that all so long, and I'm from Florida. So, and I'm not rich, I just kept my house when I moved because it was about paid for. In a small town, so I can get, and my parents lived there, I could get rent, and it was renters, and it was taken care of. But anyway, I was so tired of fucking with that thing, I was like, I need a vacation, this is where I'm going. And, because normally I would just probably come up Friday night and then came here.
I was always I'm not worried about safety shit. I just want to go fast. I'm getting to spend that extra $700 on more shit to make me go fast, and now we're not going back to the track until we have this or
Are you ready next year?
hopefully by March.
When somebody said that we need fire extinguishers inside the cockpit.
He's not racing until we get first time.
Me and Ben Baker know the guy is this guy personally that threw his fire extinguisher out to cause a fire, to cause a caution.
Right.
And that's all I could think of with him when he told me that. He goes, yeah, I did that once. And
Kate may, I don't care where you buy them, she may have them.
Well, I was going to talk. I talked to Curtis a while back about which one do we need to get. He said he was doing some research on it, trying to figure out which one we need to get.
I don't know one thing.
And that's up
I
to
just know
you.
she does, and she knows that she's smart.
Yeah. I'll get your I'll get her contact info from you.
Yeah.
That's probably wrong.
What you just did.
Well,
it ain't, you know what?
Well, no, I want to buy from people that were actually willing to participate in this deal and put in.
Was she getting room free?
Right.
I spent, like you did, I spent $1,500.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't think that through.
Right.
And she gave room free, all the setup, if I had done that, I could have done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I mean, I say that, I wasn't gonna do that on my own.
Yeah.
But like I said, next bag ready for fire, there'd be keyboard warriors. I'm gonna say, you know what?
There's a video online you could have watched that prevented that.
Could have watched, prevented that.
they just went run their mouth.
Where you going? Yeah, I am. Going on?
Yeah.
Get some stuff.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to get my stuff.